People who were in a coma, what change surprised you when you woke up? About 20 years ago, my cousin had a severe head injury from a fall. He was about 20 at the time. I was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he fairly quickly discovered that his memory was eidetic. He could repeat entire conversations backward for word, and even tell you the date and time you said something. Also, he could memorize images with just a few seconds glance. His memory is still eidetic today. It's annoying as fuck. Whenever he reminds me of something I said in the past, usually something I can't even remember, I suggest that we hit him in the head again. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to contrast dye and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For nearly 3 months, she was confabulating about her long dead parents. She would speak about them like they were in the next room. Or she would say her daughter or brother called. But they hadn't. Over and over she thought her mom was alive. Then her dad. Drove me crazy having to gently correct her many times per day. She would come up with amazing tales about what people, relatives, friends, neighbors were doing. What they said. Truly creative fiction. 3 months later, she began to come back. The confabulation stopped. Now things are reversed. She can remember recent events but her long-term memories are gone. I don't know what that's like but it must be awful. She cries sometimes for her lost memories but overall she is doing very well. I was in a coma for 4 days from bacterial meningitis. When I woke up I was completely deaf. I had to communicate with my parents and doctors with a notepad and pen. Some hearing gradually returned in my left ear. But the right ear is still 100% deaf to this day. My wife was in a coma. 2 weeks medically induced. When she woke she had very wrong memories. They were all based on conversations people had while in the room with her. For example, she thought they flew her to Washington DC for treatment while she was in a coma. My father-in-law mentioned how he just flew back into town from DC on a work trip. Somehow, she overheard this while out and her brain interpreted it to mean she flew to DC. Even after we explained to her the reality of where she was. It took days for her to come to terms with reality. Edit. She was in a coma about 10 years ago. She is not currently in a coma. A good friend of our family went into a coma for half a year. Finally when he woke up, he was stunned why his wife looked so old. He actually lost the last 15 years of his memory. He knew he had 2 children but they were babies and he didn't even know about his 3rd child. And the memory never came back. He skipped from no mobile phones to smartphones. To laptops. Everything was new to him. Being stuck in early 90s but actually being in the 2000s. There was a lot of change to handle. But learning you missed all your children growing up was the hardest for him. My mom was in an induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed and she fell on the floor BC she could not walk. She was mostly freaked about how her feet had lost their form. They were humped over from not being used. Every muscle she had to learn again. She couldn't talk well or write at all. She has different handwriting after relearning. She said she hated how perfect her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were perfect and clean from not being used. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up. Almost all of it fell out. She almost died pretty much every day she was in her coma. She had sepsis from a diverticulitis surgery gone wrong. A lot of her hair has grown back and she can walk but has brain damage that makes her seem very drunk. She is always dizzy. But it's been 5 years now and her recovery has been miraculous. Thank you all so very much for the love. I can't wait to tell her of all the people here are rooting for her. She's going to be so happy. And to whoever gave me my first gold. It's an honor to earn it for my mother. Truly. Thank you. It's also going to be good for her to hear how much of you went through similar things and ended up with brain damage. She won't feel so alone. I truly thank each and every one of your comments. Much love to you all. Back in the 90s, my great-grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks. And when he woke up, He could not speak English. All he could speak was the Choctaw language. He had learned it when he was a kid, because his family lived right near a Choctaw reserve, and he played with a lot of those kids. He spoke it fluently at that time, but forgot it over his life to where he couldn't remember any of it by this time. This went on for around 10 days, and then he woke up from a night's sleep and could suddenly speak only English again, not remembering a word of Choctaw. He was also able to repeat verbatim every conversation that had been held in the room that he was in. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I woke up, everyone was talking about the baby boy I had. I had lost my long-term memory and didn't even remember being pregnant. My son was at the children's hospital in the NICU. I delivered him via C-section at 29 weeks. All this was due to me having Crohn's disease. I found out after I woke up. My colon had ruptured during my pregnancy. My husband said I was talking like a child when I first woke up. When I woke, I felt super tired. But then the next few days, kinda restless. I remembered one conversation my mom had with a nurse while I was under. After a couple of days, I got my long-term memory back and remembered everything up until my second surgery, then nothing until I woke up. My son was my third surgery. Edit. So my son was what surprised me. My nephew, 14, was in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During that time, he had lost about 30% of his body weight as his muscles atrophied. His first remark upon seeing himself for the first time was, "Did you forget to feed me?" Which was incredibly hard to hear since his family had sat crying at his bedside every moment he was unconscious. There is that one guy who commented on a thread like this before. He grew up, had a family and kids and memories for a lifetime only to wake up. He was super depressed after. Was in a coma for 2 days. Not medically induced. Woke up utterly confused at the time and day. Didn't know if it was morning, evening, what day of the week. Couldn't believe where and what time it was. Was very agitated. Had vague memories of what happened before it all went black, but they were very confusing and erratic ones. Turned on my computer to check the daytime. Realized I'd missed an exam and that a whole 2 days had passed without my knowledge and freaked out about that. Frantically charged my phone to check for messages. My absence mostly went unnoticed and I felt extremely lucky. Then relieved. Then sad and started bawling uncontrollably. Edit. Should have mentioned. This was a hypoglycemic coma. I didn't just open my eyes and plop. I'm back on my feet and I'm freaking out. My first memory of easing back into consciousness is of me rocking back and forth in a fetal position on the bathroom countertop while eating an apple. Then some time passed by and I later regained consciousness, but this time lying on the floor. I don't recall how I got the apple or to the countertop or back to the floor, but as my mind started working again, I was distressed and extremely agitated. Very recently went into a 3-day coma following a suicide attempt. I have very vivid memories of watching How to Train Your Dragon during that time. So I can only assume it was playing on the television in my room and my mind filled in the blanks. I'm glad it was only an attempt and hope you are feeling better. I am. Literally just got out of the hospital and am looking for a fresh start. Oh hey, I finally got to one of these fairly quickly. I was in a short coma, 3 months, but the time really messed me up since it crossed the new year. It felt so much longer. I was also really groggy and had surgery on a leg and totally thought it was amputated, so my first response was to freak out and start ripping everything out. Do not do this. I wasn't really in a coma, but I remember when I woke up from having my appendix removed. I couldn't read. I was 13 at the time and I loved to read books. So I wasn't illiterate or anything. I could see fine too. I just wasn't able to read. It only lasted for a few minutes. But it was very weird. I went into surgery to get my appendix out. Note, I was on an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf in 2004. I didn't know it at the time, but I have malignant hypothermia, which pretty much means I die if I get in a seizure. Long story short, I woke up 4 days later and I thought, why are my calves sore? I was in a coma for 16 weeks. This was when I was in New York. I woke up and 2 hours later looked out my hospital window. It was October 16, 2001. I looked to where the Twin Towers were supposed to be. Imagine my surprise when all I saw was crews of people cleaning up rubble from the 9/11 attacks. A guy I dated for a few weeks in high school was standing at a bus stop when I was driving back to my old hometown to visit my parents. I waved at him and he just looked bewildered. So I messaged him on Facebook just to be nice. It turns out that he had no idea who I was cause he'd been in an accident and a nearly half-year coma. He somehow woke up with a Scottish accent and had to relearn to walk. His family finally figured out that the Scottish accent was because his ultra-Scottish grandma was with him a lot as a baby, and I guess that's what his brain latched onto. He's now a happy Ren Fair performer who used to be a very troubled guy headed for military service. I guess he's happier. But it really makes you wonder who he would have become. He also kept asking me if I knew why he wore this specific ring. Unfortunately I didn't. Wow, on AskReddit I can answer. I was in a coma for 15 days during November 2018. You know those jokes about a dude waking up from a coma and hearing something critical changed or someone died? Stanley died while I was comatose and I saw it on the news when I was recovering. Open bracket. Edit. I also thought I was in a coma from snowboarding and attempting to heel flip my snowboard. It took 3 months for it to click that you cannot possibly do that while strapped to the board. I have never snowboard. I also can't do anything besides an ollie on a skateboard. Edit 2. Coma was from a staph infection that caused 8+ mini strokes. Edit 3. I don't really post on Reddit. Check my history. Prob less than 10 comments ever. So getting to tell my story on this AskReddit and having my most upvoted post ever be the tale of the most whack event in my life is pretty great. Thanks everybody. I was in a coma for 9 days. Probably most surprised by how I had to relearn how to pee and swallow. Also, not a change. But I was surprised that if I had never woke up I'd have just never known. If that makes sense. No light. No dreams. Just a big nothing that I'd never be aware of if I hadn't woke up. Don't know what I was expecting. I'm not particularly religious or anything. It's just weird. I had a skull fracture at 9. When I fully came out of the coma, I could not speak. I could not walk. I could not tell when I had to pee. And I cried a lot. It took a month to regain the ability to walk, which was my condition to be released. Talking came back more easily. And the bedwetting was beaten back in a couple of weeks. I was on anti-seizure medications for 8 years. I don't remember any of my childhood except from photos. Post accident. I remember some things but I was a weird kid. FCK. I'm crying now. I don't cry so easily these days. Long term. I graduated from a university with a degree in anthropology. Got an MBA. Started multiple small businesses. A couple were a little successful. Struggle with emotions maybe more than most. Was addicted to alcohol and cigarettes for 20+ years. Quit both in July. Look normal. Feel like I'm weird still. And I'm complicated to others but feel quite great about my ability to contribute and be a team player. I'm single. Unmarried. Cry noticeably out of my right eye when I eat something hot in temperature. Not spicy. And have my other quirks. Alcohol kept me up a lot with depression and wished I had a therapist earlier in life. I'm moving today because I'm a broke 45-year-old with a great heart that feels unwanted by society's norms. The space shuttle Columbia exploded while I was in a 7-day medically induced coma. I watched the memorial service when I woke up. It actually took a while for me to realize I had no idea what happened. Similar experience with the Boston bombing. I was having my right hip replaced while it happened. Balloon Boy happened while I was having surgery on my broken right hip. Sandy Hook while I was having my left hip replaced. I was in a coma for almost 2 weeks. The things that surprised me was the personality change. I went from a meek sweetheart, but my husband, to a total raging bitch. This lasted a couple of weeks while in the hospital. Like if you ever been in a hospital or nursing home, there is always one patient screaming at the top of their lungs. Yeah. That was me. I yelled at everyone nearly, my poor nurses. One nurse actually threatened me because I was just that bad to him. 2. I was surprised how quickly your body deteriorates while bedbound. I went from relatively strong to not being able to sit on the edge of a bed without someone holding me up. I was like a sack of potatoes. Not to mention bed sores. I had no idea they could happen that fast. I was in a coma for a week. When I woke up, I couldn't believe that I slept for a week, and it bothered me something awful that I couldn't remember anything about that week. I kept checking the date online and on my cell phone and an actual calendar and couldn't get over the fact that I was asleep for a whole week. I got the feeling that I died for 7 days and was fortunate to wake up from the dead. My son worried that I might have lost some mental functions and insisted that I take an online IQ test to see if I lost anything. Didn't.